All right, TJ, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Doing really good. Excited to have you here. Well, I guess we work here, so it's something that I feel is really unique, and another reason why I love utilizing my network to interact with entrepreneurs and people that are just doing cool shit all the time. For our listeners, welcome back to the Rise and Go podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis. And I'm super excited to have our next guest here. I'm going to have him introduce himself, and then we'll jump into some social media handles, and then we'll jump into the program.
My name is TJ Aubrecht, and I am an ice cross downhill racer. Born and raised here in Minnesota. I work here with you at Kipsu as a salesman, so that's what pays the bills. But the ice cross downhill side of things is what brings me that adrenaline rush and that fun throughout.
Yeah, I love it that working at Kipsu I think has actually been a really great opportunity for both of us, and working in sales is something that I've kind of always had an interest in doing. I know it's a unique department within an organization. But before we jump into all that, for our listeners, you can find the Rise and Go podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Our Elevon handles for social media for Instagram is Elevon MPLS. That's also the same for Twitter or X. Facebook is Elevon, and then for TikTok, we are Elevon5. TJ, where can they find you?
You can find me on all my social media handles at Auby1987, AUBY 1987.
Love it. It's so funny. I had a podcast earlier or over the weekend, and we were talking about social media handles because I have different ones for different. So it's like, I wish I could just have one for everything, but of course, it never works out that way.
That was one of those things when I was setting them up early on, a decade ago. I had different ones for everything, and I'm like, this is too hard to tag everything, so I just had to consolidate. But it's tough if you don't get them early.
Yeah.
Someone else out there has grabbed it, and you're like, how do they have the same name as me?
Right. Well, it's interesting too, because I think with social media handles, you can purchase them from people. I'm just like, I don't want to spend another dollar on doing another thing that, again, it's small in the grand scheme of things. But again, I think as Elevon continues to hopefully grow, that's something maybe I'll attack down the line. But why don't you just kind of introduce yourself? Start from the beginning. Let us know a little bit more about who you are, where you come from, and what you're all about.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see, where do I start? Like I mentioned earlier, I was born and raised here in Minnesota. I'm a longtime hockey player. So that's kind of where my passion for the ice and skating and everything like that starts. Played high school, played a year of juniors out in Wisconsin. So that's about the highest level of hockey I got. Now, with hockey, you still have that competitiveness, you have that camaraderie, you have the locker room, everything like that. When I was done playing juniors, you lose a lot of that. And when you lose a lot of that and you're at college, there are other habits that you can kind of pick up to make up for that. And mine at the time, we were partying, we were drinking, which isn't really the healthiest. It's really not good for your mental health. And when you start to lose a little bit of the camaraderie, the locker room, the game in which you grew up with, you start to be a little bit depressed. So when I first saw ice cross, I believe it was 2011, I saw it on TV somewhere. I was super interested right away. And I had been talking to all my friends at college. I was like, this is something I'd love to do. Would love the opportunity to just try it. And I had a roommate back at the time, her name is Allison, who she signed me up without me knowing. And back then you had to sign up, your name had to be pulled out of a lottery, and then you had to skate at the Xcel Energy Center on flat ice, and you had to be one of the fastest guys in order to move on to have a chance to try a track. Luckily enough, my name got pulled out of a hat. I skated at the Xcel. I was one of the fastest guys at the Xcel, so I had a chance to try a real crashed ice track here in St. Paul in 2012. So that was the very first year that I had an opportunity to go down a track. I was hooked immediately.
Sure.
Absolutely right away. There's nothing like the adrenaline rush. It combines hockey with skiing, downhill biking. You're fighting 3 other guys off at the same time. And I really have never felt anything like that, even in hockey. I mean, the competitiveness comes out, but you can only go so far with your adrenaline. Once I tried it the first time, it was something where I knew I had to keep going. And as I continued to pursue the sport and get better, I had to start working out again. I had to stop with the bad habits. It really brought me out of this funk that I was in. And the people I was meeting, the places we were traveling to was out of this world. It was stuff that I don't think I ever would have experienced had I not gotten involved in ice cross. So, fast forward here 2-3 years after doing a couple different tracks, I started to become part of the organization side of things. I started to build tracks here in the US, specifically in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So it really kind of took on a life of its own, and it really brought me out of this really sort of stuck, depressive, sad mindset into something where like, this is super motivating. But it's not motivating just for me. I've never been a selfish guy. I've always wanted to try to help others. And having the opportunity to build tracks with a new sport that maybe people don't know about means that I can try and create some sort of a legacy. And again, it's not a legacy for myself. It's like a legacy of the sport. When I am 50 years old, I want to be able to look back and I want to be able to have my daughter or, kids that are just, 10, 11, 12 years old, give them an opportunity to try ice cross. I think about what hockey did for me when I was little. That's kind of what I want for ice cross. And I think that there is a spot in the extreme sports world for this sport. I think there's a spot in the Olympics for this sport. And if we continue to grow, we expect to be in the Olympics in this next round. So France in 2030 or 2028 or 2030, which would be fantastic.
Yeah.
So that was, a long-winded answer for where I came from to what I'm doing now, but I feel good about it.
I mean, my mind's kind of blown. It's so interesting because I remember like back in the day, like when Crash Ice or Ice Cross first came on the scene, it almost kind of seemed like a gimmick a little bit. It's I think about like Red Bull and how they do a lot of very unique things with their athletes, and to see where Ice Cross is gone today. You sent me some videos, and I was like, man, that is absolutely incredible. The experience that it is, the work that goes into it, and to have you be such an integral part of kind of the growth and experience of that, it's got to be really exciting for you. Now, I want to go back to the beginning. I got a ton of questions on the ice cross, but I want to chat a little bit more about your early life when you were like playing hockey. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school in Farmington, Minnesota.
Okay.
Small town.
Yeah. Were they a good hockey program?
We were not.
Okay. I was going to say, I went to Hopkins and we were awful too. So
we were in a conference that was very difficult. I remember we played a team called Holy Angels. Mm-hmm. They were really good. As a high school hockey player, it was something that you always wanted to go to the state high school hockey tournament.
Yeah, it's huge.
Here in Minnesota is massive. You talk to, or I guess if you listen to any interviews of a Minnesota-born player who's playing in the NHL, they've played at the highest level, and they still say the Minnesota high school hockey tournament is something that blows all their other accomplishments out of the water.
Yeah.
So that was always something I strive for. Never got there. I got about one game away, but I still wouldn't change it for the world. It's kind of made me who I am today.
It's so interesting. My nephew played hockey at Orono, and they were lucky enough his senior year to go to the state tournament, and he still talks about it to this day. And being both of us were high school athletes, and I was able to go to the state tournament for our baseball program. And as high school athletes, I feel like a very small percentage of them have the ability to go play on afterwards. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it was something that you tried to play hockey afterwards, went into juniors. Describe that experience for me.
Yeah. So being a senior in high school, I had a few different colleges in mind. Now, hockey wasn't what was bringing me to the college, unfortunately. I would have loved to have gone somewhere, not had to pay a tuition because I was playing a sport. But that wasn't the case. So I got into school. I had tried out for the team there. I went to University of Wisconsin Stout, so just a little Wisconsin school. Spoke with the coach after tryouts, and he had mentioned that if I got a year of juniors under my belt, that I would have that much more experience. I could get a little bit bigger in size and strength, and there might be a possibility to make the team the following year. So I followed his suggestions, played the year of juniors in Hudson, which was an unbelievable experience. It was hockey every day, little responsibilities. You got a chance to still have the camaraderie with the guys and everything like that. But at the end of the day, I knew I wasn't going to the NHL, so it was just kind of like stalling the inevitable. How long can I actually skate before I actually hang them up or something like that, which is a depressing thought. But I had a great time. Played the year of juniors, went to try out the next year, and the coach that year said I just wasn't big enough, wasn't strong enough, and he was going for much larger size individuals than me. So I didn't make the team that year, which was pretty hard to take. And that's where you kind of fall into those bad habits. You start partying all the time, and you think that that's what's giving you enjoyment throughout, the day, the weekends, but it really isn't. And you can only do that for so long before you technically can hit a rock bottom. And you have to find something else that really motivates you to become better, and not just better individually, but better for the people around you. And that's where ice cross came in right at the right time. It got me out of this funk. It was something that's like, hey, if you want to get better at this sport, you got to start working out again. You got to start taking care of your body. And I'm so thankful that my roommate signed me up really without me knowing, because it has led me around the world. I have friends all across the globe. I've traveled to, 15, 20 different countries now because of ice cross. If I have an opportunity to go to France, I have friends that I can stay over. So the people I've met, the places I've been, the funk it got me out of, I'm just super grateful for.
That's amazing. And it's so funny when you talk about like, having to, unofficially, officially retire from your sport. It's something I talk about a lot is, my baseball experience. I was, fortunate enough to play in college, and then, I was actually kicked off my junior college team. Again, I understand like that funk that you got into, because what did I turn? I turned to drugs and alcohol, and it hindered me for a small portion of time. But I was fortunate enough for a coach to take a chance on me and give me a scholarship to go play out in Tennessee. And then through that experience, I was like, oh, I still have a shot, because everyone's goal is when you're an athlete is to go play professionally. Yep. And then when that didn't happen for me, once I graduated from college, my mom was diagnosed with ALS, so I ran into some trouble with just life challenges, and it didn't work out for me that I was going to play professionally. And then again, I feel for you when you talk about those challenges that you face, because it's like I face those same ones, and again, it's thrilling to hear that you found something that you're passionate about. I think that's one of the core values of what Rise and Go is all about, is what motivates you day in and day out. Now, let's chat ice cross here. So tell us about like the very beginning. Like how did it even like become a thing?
So we mentioned it a little bit ago. Ice cross is the new term for the sport.
Yep.
Most people know it better as crashed ice. And it came about when Red Bull was the major sponsor. And Red Bull's always been known for doing these crazy events, really crazy areas. But it's always been like a gimmick, a publicity stunt, a hobby, something like that. So getting into the sport was just that. Like it was a hobby. It was like you'd go and you'd skate down a track for a little bit in front of, 200,000 people here in St. Paul. But then the real fun was the after party afterwards. And for Red Bull, they never wanted to treat it as an actual sport. They were there to make money. They were there to sell their product. And that was really about it. Fast forward about 6 years later, it's about 2018, 2019, Red Bull leaves. So now we have no title sponsor. We no longer are having events in downtown areas like St. Paul or the middle of France or Quebec, Canada. We basically are starting from scratch with zero budget. And when you have something like that, but you have a group of passionate individuals who are doing this out of the goodness of their hearts and not for themselves, that's really what creates a core community to really grow the sport internally. So you lose that sponsor, but yet you still have these individuals who are putting all their own time, their own money to go on a ski hill, build this track that takes weeks to do, all for the opportunity to just skate down it a couple times. So it sounds really crazy. It is a little crazy. We've been known to be told that we have a couple loose screws.
Yeah.
But look at it today. We now are having 5, 6, 7 events a year all throughout the globe. Ski hills are super interested, super involved. And really it's gotten to the point where now we're having a documentary released about ice cross and where it came from, where it's going. So we're really excited to be able to have the opportunity to have a real documentary that's going to be broadcast live on a ton of different streaming services. and get a ton of new eyes on it, because we feel like that is going to help the growth of the sport. Ice cross to me is controlled chaos on ice, and there's nothing like it.
5-second warning!
As soon as you get into the gate and that 5-second warning is called, like everything goes silent. That's probably the most peaceful time you'll ever experience in life.
There's no buddy thing out there, you know. Yeah, it's a war out there.
Coming through all that, and then working through with what I've dealt with, I'd probably have to say that ice cross has probably saved my life.
Sport.
For sure. So with the documentary that you mentioned, like streaming services, when does it come out? Where can people find that?
So I know that the producers right now are still working with the, I don't know if it's the development company or the company that kind of not owns the rights, but has the rights to spread it out. The last I was updated is it's supposed to come out within the next 2 to 3 weeks here. It should be Amazon Prime is kind of the leading streaming service right now who's interested in it. But once that comes out, I mean, I'll be spreading it everywhere.
We'll be spreading it everywhere too.
So I think it's something that obviously you have a ton of different documentaries out there already. And I think this one really brings to light how much work goes into putting on an event for $0. You get to a documentary like the racing documentary. Or something like that. There's millions and millions and millions of dollars behind the production of that. For our documentary, it was maybe $30,000 to get everything going. The film crews, 2 years in the making, telling the story of 4 athletes trying to win a world championship, but not just win a world championship. It's what's going on in their individual lives and how they overcome that. And it's kind of crazy to listen to some of the other athletes' stories too. Not to give too much away from the documentary, but the 4 leading athletes, all of them are going through personal issues, just like we all are going through personal issues. You got an athlete who's traveling from Australia who doesn't get to see his family. He's the only athlete in Australia to compete in ice cross. He's really out of his element being in the snow and being from Australia. We have another athlete who struggles with drugs, alcohol. He's been sober now for the last 7 years, and it's turned his life around to be involved with the sport, build tracks, and things like that. We have a third athlete who's had family loss, cancers in the family. So everybody's struggling, but it's what motivates you throughout the day to come back and be part of this community. And that's really what it comes down to, is the community and the people involved that make it special. We travel all over the world, and it's the traveling and it's the delayed flights and it's a plane ride that takes 12 hours to get on a train that takes 3 hours to get on a cab that takes an hour, then to walk an extra 4 blocks to get to the Airbnb in some random city, all to race. So there's a lot that goes into it, and I think the story behind ice cross is such a unique story, and people are really going to connect with it.
I couldn't agree more. I'm already connected to it. I feel like I love what you're saying. You're sharing a little bit more of the behind the scenes, right? It's not just the crash sites. It's about the athletes. It's about the challenges they face, and I think that's where the audience is really going to connect with this docu-series, with the content that you're going to be sharing with folks. And, that's like the rise and go message right there is, again, it's like life is a bitch for everybody, right? Everyone's going to have to face these really hard challenges. How are you going to rise and go and work your way through those things? And to hear about, some of the athletes in there, family problems, being from Australia, having to travel, doing all this kind of on a bootstrap budget, again, I think that is truly what's going to help people connect to the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's chat a little bit more about like crashed ice, the strategy. Like, tell us like what is the competition? Like, what is the goal? Like, how does it work so that our listeners who are clueless, kind of like me, have a better understanding of like what it is.
So crashed ice is essentially, it's 4 athletes in a heat. We start with what we call a round of 64. So there's 64 athletes that will start the racing. You go down 4 at a time, and the track is filled with bumps, curves, hairpin turns, giant jumps, and you're basically battling the other 3 athletes to be the fastest one down. Each heat, the first 2 athletes to finish will move on to the next round until you are down to just the final 4. Obviously, you want to be the fastest down. There's no checking, there's no pulling, pushing, or anything like that, but you can hold your line, and crashing is inevitable in ice cross. It's going to happen. That's just kind of the format of it. When you get into the gates, though, and you hear your riders ready, 5-second warning, everything goes completely silent. And it is one of the most peaceful times you will ever experience. I remember being in St. Paul, 200,000 people watching, and they say, riders ready, 5-second warning. I don't remember seeing the crowd. I don't remember hearing the crowd. You could have a game plan in your head, but that all goes out the window the second those gates open. And that experience is unlike anything I have ever been a part of in my life. And I think that's what keeps me coming back, at least for the racing side.
Yeah, it's got to be a pretty big adrenaline rush right there.
It is a massive adrenaline dump. It would be the best way to put it. It's, you get all warmed up, like you normally would for a sporting event, and then there could be delays with the ice or broadcast or whatever, so you're stuck waiting for an hour before you get on the track. It's really tough mentally to get prepared for a race, have a type of delay or something like that, and then be like, your heat's going, let's go.
Yeah.
You get up there, you have to get all amped up again. Yeah, as I mentioned, once those gates open, it is just chaos. It is controlled chaos on ice, and there's nothing like it.
I can't even imagine. I don't even know how to skate. I'd literally crash in the beginning. But tell us, as a competitor, like, what is like your strategy? What are your strengths as an athlete in this sport?
Yeah. So my strategy is to not fall.
Mm-hmm.
You're faster on your feet than you are on your butt. So I also have to play to a little bit of my strengths and weaknesses. I am not the fastest guy out of the gate, but I do know where I can pass and where I can't pass on the track. Now, most tracks are only about 30 to 40 seconds long. So out of the gate, you only have about 20 more seconds to make up your mind and make a move. Now, if you can get out of the gate in front of everybody, you can avoid the chaos behind you, but you know that people are breathing down your neck.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't like to be out in front right away because I can't see what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen. If I take a wrong line, someone's going to take a better racing line and pass me. I would rather be in second or third out of the gate and be able to make my move towards the last quarter of the track and make a sweet pass and come in and move on. So that's kind of where my strategy comes in. But as I mentioned, the gates open. Maybe I am 4th out of the gate, and now I have to play catch up. Or maybe I'm 1st out of the gate, and in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, where is this guy going to come from? How am I going to block him? All these thoughts are going through your head, but you only have a 30-second race.
Right.
So it's really kind of, I don't really like to swear on podcasts, but it's a mind fuck.
Yeah. Well, and I've watched a lot of videos on this, and it's exactly what it says. Like, you'll see people crash, you'll see people fall, and again, that probably gives you a huge advantage when you're not in front, because again, if people are pushing to get out in the front, they're probably going to take a pretty close line to you and maybe take you out, and then the race is over for you. So, with like the athletes too, I would presume 100% of them probably played hockey at some point in time. There's probably got to be some pretty big, fast athletes in this. Kind of give us an idea of some of the best competitors that you go against.
Yeah, so you mentioned it already. Most guys' background come from a hockey background. A lot of our Europeans actually didn't really play too much hockey, but they are major skiers. And the skiing actually, I think, sets you above having a hockey background because of the way that you have to carve when you're skiing, or what we say, you're drifting around turns. You're much faster, and the Europeans can also pick out racing lines much better than us. So being an American or a Canadian who played hockey, especially on flat, smooth ice, you think you're really fast in a straight line, and you might beat them out of the gate. But the Europeans, the Germans, the Russians, they'll all come in and they've already experienced being really fast on rough terrain, so they are ahead of the game. And I think it really kind of separates the really good athletes from the average athletes. Going back, I wish I would have been more of a downhill skier, downhill biker, just to get the sense of going fast on uneven terrain. You look at the guys who've been world champions. There's Scott and Kyle Croxall, who are from Canada, Marco Delago from Austria, Martin Niefnecker, who's a German guy. They all still have that skiing background. But not only that, they're all in shape.
Yeah.
A couple of these guys, I mean, Kyle Croxall, he's a firefighter. So he's doing major exercises. He's always in shape. He's a big guy. I think he's like 25, so he's very tough to pass on the track. Marco Delago, who I just mentioned, is an Austrian rider. He's maybe 5'10", 185 pounds, but he's so smooth and so fast. So you have just this wide range of athletes and body types, but everybody's competitive. And I think what's really cool about ice cross is the track itself. Anything can happen on there. So regardless of how much you train, regardless if you won the world championship last year, you could hit a rut in the ice and go down in the first round, and it's anybody's race. So I think that is super motivating, even for new athletes who maybe are a little anxious, a little nervous, the confidence isn't there. Anything can happen on the track, and you just have to have the mindset where I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to leave it all out on the track, literally. And at the end of the day, if I'm one of the fastest ones through, that's great. But when I started the sport, you mentioned earlier, we all want to play professional. We all wanted to sign that massive contract or something like that. Being part of Red Bull and Crashed Ice, we signed contracts. We were getting paid to do this. So, technically we were professional athletes, but it still comes down to the camaraderie and just creating something outside of yourself that drives me. So I always bring it back to creating this legacy or creating a sport that when I look 15 years from now, there's kids doing it. When we get done racing at the end of a track, there's kids waiting there that want us to sign autographs, and they don't even know who we are. But yet, that feeling is so rewarding.
I bet, man. It's funny because I playing amateur baseball. Sometimes we'll have kids from the little league or the youth leagues come up there, and they'll come down hey, can we have your? I'm like, you don't know this, but I'm the most washed up baseball player on the planet. But again, it's still it gives you a sense of pride because again, it's the kids are interested in the sport. They see what you're doing, and again, you could have a huge impact on what their interests are now and in the future. And this is something that Quentin and I talked about. Again, it's leaving a lasting legacy. It's so important that, the things that you're doing go beyond just self-satisfaction. And that was something we talked about with Elevant was the goal is, hopefully my grandkids or, people that have been in my life or, younger folks in this generation, can see Elevant and see that it's something that, I helped grow, I helped evolve, and just use it as a vehicle to help other people. That's always kind of been the goal. What are some future goals for ice cross here?
Obviously, we want to get back to the days of Red Bull style tracks. Those tracks, on average, were anywhere from $5 to $8 million to put on. I don't have $5 to $8 million in my own bank account.
Sure.
But to kind of give it a little bit of perspective, when I would put on an event like we have at Mont du Lac, which is in Superior, Wisconsin, most of the years we put it on was between $8,000 and $12,000. So very manageable. We can get some local sponsors to kind of help pick up some of those expenses. The hill that we work with helps us so much. They have all the machinery, the equipment, they give us some labor to be able to put on these events. Now, they're still very grassroots driven. There's not necessarily a live stream. We don't have thousands of cans of Red Bull being spread across, but yet we still get a ton of spectators that come out. The sport is something where anytime we have it on a hill, even if it's in a random area, people come out and they look at it and they go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is action packed. I've never seen anything like this. Why isn't this bigger? So, in 3 to 5 years from now, I hope to just continue to have more grassroots events, but that will lead to maybe a finale that is a multi-million-dollar event. And we're getting to that level again. This year we just had, I would say, our biggest race we've had in 2 or 3 years, probably since COVID. And that was in Val Thorens, France. It cost them about $250,000 to put on, so still a pretty hefty price tag. But the ski area was super interested. And they've locked us in now for the next 2 to 3 years.
Nice.
They're also part of the French Federation for the Olympics, which is getting our foot in the door to be at the Olympics in 2030. The IOC was also in attendance at Val Thorens this year. So there's real talk of the sport being included in the Olympics. And that to me would be kind of that stamp of approval, like, all right, the sport's legitimate. We've got recognition around the world. Now let's bring it back to the Red Bull days. Let's have those large events. We skated inside Fenway Park. Like, let's get that back and let's have a stadium series or something like that. So that's kind of where my mind goes when where I want to see the sport.
Well, you have like all these great ideas and like things that, when put in place, again, will continue to expand the sport. It's so funny because I'm thinking like if breakdancing and ray gun are in the Olympics, like crashed ice makes way more sense than that. But no, we've chatted a little bit about kind of your passion behind it, your motivation. And this is the part of the conversation where I always ask people, what makes you rise and go? What is, driving you again to, really kind of live out this dream and continue to chase them?
It brings to mind kind of one story, and it happened a couple weeks ago at Val Thorens. I was out there just to enjoy myself, race, be with the guys. So after a few practice runs, you get down towards the end of the track, you see the fans, some spectators, some kids. You shake hands, you sign a couple autographs, you take some pictures, and then you go back up to the top. We got done with our time trials. And at the end of our time trials, I finished, and there was a kid waiting at the finish line. And I remember him from the practice rounds. I think he was probably 7 or 8 years old, but he had asked for an autograph already. In between the time of me doing a practice run and finishing time trials, so maybe 2 hours or so, the kid had drew me a picture. And, he's 6 or 7, so the picture was kind of scribbles or something like that, but didn't speak any English. He was a completely French kid, but he gave me the picture, and his mom was standing behind him, and she said, my son really likes you as an athlete. He loves your jersey. He's really hoping you win this weekend. It really kind of took me back, and it brought me out of being an athlete, and it brought me into being like, this is bigger than me. I remember being a kid and going to hockey games, football games, and seeing these athletes come out and, wanting to slap hands with them or ask them for autographs, and they just walk right by. They never give you any time of day. And it's, thankful I was happy to be part of the sport then, but it's kind of demoralizing, right? Like, I always told myself, if I ever got in a position of being a professional athlete or somebody that I was looked up to, I'm going to take the time out of my day to give them a high five, take the pictures, give the autograph. And so this little kid in France on some ski hill is drawing me a picture. I took the picture, I slapped it on the back of my glove, I raced with it back here. It was super motivating for me to give this kid a good experience, take the pictures with him, because if the sport is there in 5 to 10 years from now, that kid is going to want to be involved. And I think that's what kind of keeps me rising and going, right? It's the motivation of creating something outside of yourself for somebody else to maybe drive them or get them out of a funk or avoid any sort of funk. Their sports are there for a reason, and it's not always to win at the end of the day. There's struggles going on that we already kind of talked about in everybody's individual lives. And sports are so great for releasing some of that pent up energy that maybe you would release in drugs and alcohol or stuff like that. It takes nothing to be a good human and to be nice to people. That's super easy. It doesn't cost any money. And one good action to somebody else will always create another good action down the line. And if we collectively as a society can have that mindset, we are going to make the world a better place. And I know that ice cross to making the world a better place is a long stretch, but it's the little things in between that keep me going.
I was going to say, I sort of disagree. I think, it may seem that way, but again, when you're making these small little impacts on, even with kids, that's always like tugs at my heartstrings because, with my coaching, I work with college athletes now, but when I was working with youth athletes, when I see them, end up playing baseball in high school, like that's like one of the most rewarding things because it's not the impact you're making in the moment, it's the impact that you're making for them down the line. If I can continue to, push them in a positive direction, like you said, I'm betting you're hoping to see that kid, competing in ice cross one day.
Absolutely.
And, again, it's like you said, sports is a vehicle for so many positive things. I think it's a great way to build character. It's a great way to handle failure and use it as an opportunity. Again, it's tremendous for your health. It's great for activity. And, I've met some really amazing people, as you have, with the vehicle that you're driving. And I think that's so amazing that you tell that story too, and it involves, truly helping somebody. It just speaks to our Rise and Go model, like absolutely perfectly. So tell us, when's like the next event? When are you competing again?
So our next event is at the end of January. It's January 31st, February 1st, and that one is actually in Superior, Wisconsin.
Okay. My girlfriend's from like Superior.
No way.
Yeah, she's Poplar. It's just like a small town, like 20 minutes outside. So might have to check this out.
I highly recommend it. You can watch all the videos you want and everything like that, but there is nothing like standing at a track and watching guys go down at 40 miles an hour. It's something truly special.
Great. So, one more time for our listeners here, share where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, all at Obby1987.
And for your sponsorships, why don't you give them a shout out?
So we have Bear Zero Proof. They're a non-alcoholic spirits company. I also have Impossible, which is a sports drink, energy drink supplier. And then I also have a couple other sponsors, Post American Eatery in Hudson. If you're ever in Hudson and want some food, amazing place to go. And then I also have Kipsu as a sponsor as well. Without them, I don't think I would have been able to travel to France. It's been truly amazing to have my career be supportive of my second career. There really is nothing like it. And I wouldn't be here talking to you today if I didn't have the support of friends, family, and our job.
Well, that's your support system right there. I think it's so cool that our company sponsors you and uses it as an opportunity to support you even outside of work as well. So, again, to our listeners, thank you for joining us here on the Rise and Go podcast. I'm not exactly sure when this will drop. I'm probably shooting for either this Sunday or sometime next week. But TJ, thank you again for joining us here.
Absolutely.
This has been awesome. It's great chatting with you. And let's actually go get to work now.
No, seriously, I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother. Nice. Hit the stop record. Oh my God.